Hello and welcome to ONET Academy. This previously recorded webinar is part of the ONET Academy webinar series, a set of online training presentations. This webinar recording, an ONET Academy briefing, keeping pace with ONET's in-demand, fastest growing, highest paying occupations, will start momentarily.
Okay, with that, I want to turn things over to our speaker, Dr. Janet Wall. Janet?
Gary, thanks, and good morning to all of you. My name is Janet Wall, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, Keeping Pace with ONET's In-Demand, Fastest Growing, and Highest Paying Occupations. I am an independent consultant working in the area of career development and specializing in occupational information, education, vocational interests, and interactive web tools, program evaluation, and related areas. I've been a consultant to Mayor and Mayor in developing and delivering these webinars for several years now, and I'm also a certified career development facilitator instructor. So I'm just very happy to have you with me today in this webinar. For today, I have several specific goals, or specific tools, actually, that I would like to review with you. And so I want to provide you some tools that can help you find occupations that are the fastest growing, have the largest employment, have the most job openings, are in-demand occupations, are the highest paying, have a declining outlook, and also to review similar information, but at an industry level as opposed to an occupational level. Now, I'm going to go over various tools with you, but what I would recommend is to really get a feel for what is available to you. I'm just kind of skimming the surface of some of these tools. In order for you to really make these tools work for you, you need to use them yourself and then kind of see what all the alternative spin-offs of those tools are. So again, this is going to be just a general review of what is available to you, and you can make these tools do all sorts of good things for you, for your clients, for your students, for the people in your state. So the tools are found on America's Career InfoNet, and I have the URL there for you so that you can actually go to that site yourself. And again, I would recommend highly that you do that. The information that is found using these tools is, of course, based on ONET, which is the most comprehensive and up-to-date occupational information that's available in this country. And as you can see, if you go to America's Career InfoNet, if you take a look at the left-hand side of the page, you will see some tools listed, and I've got a portion of those tools on this slide here. You'll be able to find the fastest-growing occupations, those with the most job openings, those with the largest employment, those with declining employment, and also those that are the highest paying. And so I'm going to review what's possible within each of these categories. And for the first portion of the webinar, I'm going to be concentrating on occupations, and then toward the end, we're going to take a look at some tools available at the industry level. So first tool is to locate the fastest growing occupations. So you would click on that terminology, fastest growing, and what it allows you to do is to take a look at the fastest growing occupations in several different ways. You can look at those occupations overall regardless of the education level, or you can narrow it down to take a look at the fastest growing occupations that require only work experience or on-the-job training, those that require post-secondary training or an associate's degree, and then those that require a bachelor's degree or higher. So for this first part, I just want to take a look at the fastest growing occupations overall, so across all of the education levels. So I would select that, and I would click on search. And what this would do is it would bring up the top 50 fastest growing occupations in the country. And as you can see, the number one fastest growing occupation is network systems and data communications analyst. And you can see the employment numbers for 2006. You can see the projected employment in 2016. And you can then see the percent change. So there's a 53% change for that occupation. You can also take a look at the general earnings category and what the Department of Labor does is it divides the earnings into four groupings or quartiles. And if you see $4 signs, that's the highest category. And if you see a $1 sign, that's the lowest category of earnings. Then also to the far right, you can see the training needed for the occupation. So for the fastest growing occupation of network systems and data communications analysts, a bachelor's degree is generally required. But you can also see that it is at the highest earnings level. The number 2 fastest growing occupation on the list is personal and home health care aides. You can see what the employment was in 2006, projected to be in 2016, 51% change. You can see that it's in the lowest earnings category, and it requires short-term on-the-job training. Then number 3 is home health aides, computer software engineers, and so on down the list. So this particular search would bring up for you the top 50 fastest growing occupations, 25 of them at a time. Now clearly I couldn't put all 50 on the slide and still have it be somewhat readable, so we've got the top 12 fastest growing occupations across all education levels. We can also resort the list to take a look at those fastest growing occupations that just require work experience or on-the-job training. So number 1 on the list then becomes personal and home care aides. And you can again see the same information that you saw on that other list, which is the employment trends, the percent changed, the earnings category, and of course the training needed. And all these top 50 fastest growing occupations in this category are going to have pretty much the same kind of training. So number 2 on the list, home health aides, number 3, medical assistants, and so on down the line. Resorting the list for post-secondary training or an associate's degree, you have number 1 on the list, the veterinary technologists and technicians, and you can see the employment for them for 2006 and 2016. The percent change is 41% in that instance. It's in the second category of earnings, and it requires an associate degree. And then makeup artists, theatrical and performance. You can see the employment in 2006, projected for 2016, which gives it a 40% increase, but you can see then the numbers are kind of low in terms of the actual needs. It's certainly in comparison to the number 1 fastest growing occupation of veterinary technologists and technicians. But it's in the third quartile, and it requires post-secondary vocational award. And then you can see number 3, skincare specialists, then physical therapist assistants, dental hygienists, and so on down the line. We can also resort by bachelor's degree or higher. And you can see now that network systems and data communications analyst is number 1 on the list again because it's one that requires a bachelor's degree. And overall, regardless of the education level, it was the fastest growing occupation. So it clearly comes up on the bachelor's degree or higher list. And we again can see the projected employment, percent change, the earnings category, and this one requires a bachelor's degree. And you can see number 2 on the list, computer software engineers, applications, number 3, personal financial advisors, number 4, veterinarians, and so on down the line. Okay, so we've taken the tool of fastest growing occupations, and we've looked at those occupations overall and then by specific educational groupings. You can also check for an occupational profile. So any of these occupations, you merely click on the occupational title, and then you would select a state. And I've selected here for purposes of example, the state of North Carolina. And what it would do, it would give you an occupational profile for network systems and data communications analysts for the state of North Carolina. So if you take a look at the box on the left, you see a listing of what the occupation is. You can see that it's for North Carolina. You can see an occupational description. Then what you're also provided is state and national trends. And you can see this in the United States, which is the top portion of that right-hand box. And you can also see it for North Carolina specifically. So overall, across the United States, there's a 53% increase, projected increase between 2006 and 2016. And for the state of North Carolina, it's 50% increase. And then you can also see the number of job openings that are anticipated. So for the state of North Carolina, the job openings are 470. One other nice feature is that you can modify that profile. When you first use this tool, what does come up is what I just showed you. So it's basically employment and earnings trends. You can take a look at and modify the profile to include tools and technology, education and training required, web resources, related occupational profiles, tasks and activities, knowledge, skills and abilities, wage information, and so on. And if you wanted any of that in the profile, you merely check the box, and then you would ask for an update to that profile, and then it will reformulate the state profile to include the information that you have requested. So you can request it all, or you can just request certain select aspects of that occupation for the state. You can also find state-level information. And so instead of North Carolina now, I'm selecting the state of Massachusetts, and I would use that drop-down menu, select Massachusetts, click on Continue, and it would give me a state profile. So I get to see what the state looks like, a little bit about the state, the shape, where the major towns are. I also can see demographic information, so the population, the labor force, the unemployment rate, median household income, and the per capita income. And I can also see the ranking of that information as it compares to other states in the United States. Additionally, in that state profile, I can actually get a listing of the fastest growing occupations, and I can get it overall or by any of those education categories, requiring only work experience or on-the-job training, requiring post-secondary training or associate's degree, or requiring a bachelor's degree or higher. Now, if you go back up to the top portion, top half of that box, you can see that right now we've got the fastest growing occupations identified as what we're interested in. But I want to point out that you can see the occupations with the most openings, occupations with the largest employment, occupations with declining employment, and highest paying occupations for any state in the United States. So this is for the state of Massachusetts, but we could take a look at it for any of the states that you are living in. So here is taking a look at the fastest growing by state. And this is for the state of Massachusetts. Network systems and data communications analysts are at the top. Computer software engineers and system software, number 2. Computer software engineers applications, number 3. Home health aides, biomedical engineers, and so on. And we can see the employment. And in this instance, for that state, it's not yet updated to the 2006-2016 projections. So we have 2004 to 2014. And we can see that in 2004, the employment was about 8,200 for network systems and data communications analysts, and in 2014 projected to be almost 12,000 with a 43% change. And again, this is for the state of Massachusetts, and you can run this kind of thing for any state. You can also get additional information by state. So you can identify the largest employers. So if you click on the link there, that will take you to a listing of the 50 largest employers in the state of Massachusetts, or again, whatever state that you're interested in. You can also identify the state resources. So if you click on that, it's going to take you to state information and some of the specific labor market information that is available and made available at the state level, and also educational, cultural, and recreational information. And you can also find licensing information as well, and that's generally done at the state level, and you can look at that for a specific occupation or a state agency. So here, just with the kind of the one tool that I've showed you, and kind of examining the opportunities within that tool, you can get an enormous amount of helpful information that will help you understand what's going on in your state with regard to the employment situation, occupational situation, and of course getting employer information and state resource information. So again, I would recommend that you go to that tool and spend a little time on it, taking a look at what's happening nationwide and also within your state and see what the comparisons are. The next tool is to take a look at the most openings, the most job openings. So we would click on that tool. And again, for that, we have the option of taking a look at it overall across all education levels, or providing a specialized listing, a tailored listing, based on just education level. And again, it's the same education levels that we were looking at for the fastest growing occupations. So those requiring only work experience, on-the-job training, requiring post-secondary training or an associate's degree, or requiring a bachelor's degree or higher. Now, for the rest of the tools, we're not going to look at every education level because I think you have the idea now that you can do this. So we're just going to take a look at the overall across all educational levels. But I do want you to know that you can go down, drill down, or resort by each of these education levels. All right, so what appears on the list are the top 50 occupations with the most job openings. So number one on the list now is retail salesperson. And you can see that the employment in 2006 was about 4.4 million, almost 4.5 million. Number of job openings are listed there in the next column. You can see how that ranks by state, which I'll show you in just a moment. You can see the earnings quartile, so it's at the lowest quartile of earnings, and then the educational training that is generally required for the occupation. So for retail salesperson, it's short-term on-the-job training. So it is the occupation that has the most job openings. It has a relatively low pay, and it requires short-term on-the-job training. Cashiers except gaming is number 2 on the list. Waiters and waitresses are next. Customer service representatives, registered nurses, and you can see then the various criteria. But what I want to show you next is to see state information for that occupation. So you would click on, and we're going to do this for retail salespersons, on that little bar graph, and it will give us a ranking or employment trends for that occupation across the state. So if you have a person who is going into that kind of job, you may want to show them where the most job openings are for that particular occupation. And so we can see for the state of Nevada, that is a growing occupation by 47%. And you can see in 2004, about 33,000 jobs. In 2014, projected to be 48,000. For Arizona, it's number 2, about 75,000 jobs, and increasing in 2014, projected to be about 102,000. So again, you can take a look at this listing, or a person who is job hunting can take a look at this listing and see maybe where the best places to go are for that type of occupation. So I'm just showing you retail salespersons, but you can do this for any of the occupations on the list, just by clicking on that little bar graph associated with that particular occupation. The next tool is largest employment. And again, making the point that you can take a look at this overall or by education level. And again, we're only going to look at it overall. And you can see that the largest employment, retail salespersons, comes up number 1 on the list again. Cashiers except gaming is number 2. Office clerks, general. Registered nurses, number 4. Combined food preparation and serving workers, including fast food, is number 5, and so on. And then again, you have the employment, the state. You can do a state rank. You can take a look at the earnings quartile, and also the education and training level that's required. And again, you can resort the list by education level. And then it's interesting to look at declining employment. So these may be career areas or occupational areas that you and your students might want to start avoiding because the occupation, demand for the occupation is dropping. All right, again, you can look at this list according to education level. We're going to look at it overall, however. And we can see photographic processing and machine operators, number 1, fastest declining occupation. File clerks, number 2. Model makers, wood, number 3. Pattern makers, wood, number 4. Telephone operators, number 6, tied with photographic process workers, and so on. So you can see, let's go back to number 1 on that list. Photographic processing machine operators in 2006 had about 49,000 jobs, projected in 2016 to drop down to under 25,000. You can get state rank, you can see the earnings quartile, and the education and training. Now if you take a look at that far right column, I want you to take a look at the education levels, which are all short-term, moderate, or long-term on-the-job training. So I'm showing you the first basically 9 occupations. But for declining occupations, I also wanted to show you some additional occupations. And you can see that for the most part they're in the, I would say, textile industry, largely. But again, take a look at that far right-hand column and note the education and training categories for these. So we're looking at the 17 now fastest declining occupations, and they all have the short-term, moderate, or long-term on-the-job training. So we're not looking at things that have required a bachelor's degree for secondary education. And now the highest paying occupations. And again, you can look at this by education category, but we're going to take a look at it overall. And you can see that anesthesiologists are number 1 on the list. Chief executives, number 2. Family and general practitioners, number 3. Internists, number 4. And if you take a look at that listing, it's pretty much in the healthcare field, and also require quite a bit of education and training. And you can see that the hourly rate and the annual rate for 2006 was $145,000 or more. And generally, these first ones are more than $145,000. Now you can also take a look at this kind of information by industry. So now we're looking at occupations that are bound together by some common factors, and those categories are called industries. And we can, as you can see, identify the fastest growing, largest employment, declining employment, highest paying, and we can also take a look at employment by industry sector. All right, so let's do first an industry profile. And what we're asked to do is to select a state, and I've selected the state of Texas. And you can take a look at this profile by county or by metropolitan area. And I've selected Austin as the metropolitan area to take a look at. And then what it would ask me is, okay, what industry area do you want to look at? Well, for purposes of example, I've selected number 51, which is information. But you can see there's a drop-down menu, and you can select any of these areas. So I've selected information. And what it does is it gives me for the Texas Austin area in the industry sector of information, it gives me an industry description. And it also gives me some trends. So it gives me, in this instance, if we're taking a look at the top left-hand box, gives me the number of establishments in that industry for 2004, 2005, and 2006. And it gives it to me for the United States as a whole, for the state of Texas, and also for the Austin area. We can see the employment trends for those years. We can see the numeric change from the previous year and the percent change from the previous year. And we can look at that for the United States as a whole, for Texas specifically, and even drill down to the Austin area. Now the bottom right-hand box has total payroll wages, the average annual wages, and the average weekly rate wages, and it shows you by year for the United States, for Texas, and for Austin specifically. We can also find the fastest growing industries. And we would click on fastest growing, and that would bring up the top 50 fastest growing industries. And you can see that number one on the list is management, scientific, and technical consulting services. And you can see the employment trends for 2006 and projected to 2016 and the percent change. So there's a 78% expected change in management, scientific, and technical consulting services industry. Services for the elderly and persons with disabilities, gambling industries, home health care services, educational support services. So we're taking a look at the fastest growing industries. Largest employment industries. That brings us to elementary and secondary school, public and private. And the employment in 2006 was the highest. Number two, general medical and surgical hospitals, public and private, is next in line. Full service restaurants, number three. Limited service eating places, number four. Employment services, number five, and so on. And again, we can get the top 50, but I'm only showing you a partial listing here. Industries with declining employment. These might be industries that you might want to be avoiding as you work with clients and students. So the cut, sew, and apparel manufacturing industry is number one fastest declining. Number two, footwear manufacturing, jewelry and silverware manufacturing, apparel knitting mills, textile, vending machine operators, and so on. And you can see the employment 2006 projected to 2016. So the cut and sew apparel manufacturing industry has declined 58%, or is projected to decline 58%. And highest paying industries. And looking at this list, you can see that the financial area is well represented on this list. Securities brokerage, sports teams and clubs, commodity contracts dealing, miscellaneous intermediation, open-ended investment funds, offices of other holding companies, investment banking. Okay, again, these are the highest paying industries. So what I've done is to review with you various tools that you can use to take a look at the occupational trends across the United States and also specifically for your state. And you can do that in a variety of different ways. Fastest growing, largest employment, most job openings, declining, and so on. And I've also reviewed those tools that you can use at the industry and sector levels. And I want to point out some important resources that you should be aware of that are related to finding information about occupations. Of course, ONET Online, again, is the most comprehensive and up-to-date occupational information for this country. And you can find that information on online.onetcenter.org. Also, the portal for all the occupational information, the resources, the reports, and so on is found on ONET Resource Center, which is www.onetcenter.org. Also, America's Career InfoNet, which is where the tools that I reviewed with you were found, but again, pointing out to you that the occupational information is ONET-based. And also ONETacademy.com, which is where you will find a lot of training information about the ONET system. And you will also be able to find an archived webinar for this particular subject. And as Gary mentioned early on, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted on ONETacademy.com probably within the next couple days. So you can also find the PowerPoint slides that I've used as well. So be on the lookout for that and for the other recorded webinars that have been posted there. And I want to now encourage you to send in questions that you might have. And there has been a question that has come in. And it's at my institution, faculty express their interest in emerging occupations so that they can adjust curriculum to prepare graduates. Their frustration is that some occupations and respective competencies are not yet captured in ONET. How does this or will ONET address emerging occupations? Well, ONET does address emerging occupations. In fact, there are, as I recall, a couple hundred emerging occupations that have been posted within the ONET system. In fact, we've already done a couple webinars on emerging occupations, so you might want to go to ONETacademy.com and go ahead and find the webinar that deals with emerging occupations. Also, if you go to ONET Online, you will be able to, I believe it's under What's New, you will be able to see information about emerging occupations. And of course, going to the portal, onetcenter.org, you can also find information on emerging occupations. So there are three places where you can go to find that out. And so I think probably for a good, quick general overview, go ahead and go to the recorded webinar, and that actually provides a listing of the emerging occupations that have been identified, and it also discusses the process for identifying the emerging occupations. So you might want to look at that and even have some of your faculty review that webinar and determine how that actually can be incorporated into the curriculum at your community college or university or training institution. So do you have other questions? Please go ahead and type in the questions in the chat box, and they'll be posted so that I can read them and hopefully answer them. But I do want to, as you're thinking about your questions, to highlight some opportunities for you. Over the next several months, we are focusing on the user of ONET information and wanting to make information available to the general ONET community about how all of you are using ONET. And so we're doing that in three different ways. One is just what's called a spotlight, and some past spotlights have already been posted on onetnowledgesite.com. And there are a few of them up there that have been done several years ago, but we have additional ones that are being posted and will be made available quite soon. And these are generally interviews of people, ONET users, and kind of where they work, what they do, and a little more personal information about them and how they got into the business and so on. Also, we're doing podcasts And actually, I personally have done about 9 or 10 podcasts now that will also be made available shortly. And those are just audio interviews. What I do is I call you, and we chat for a little while. And out of that conversation, I develop some interview questions, and you have an opportunity to take a look at those questions and modify them, and then we will do a formal run-through, so kind of a practice podcast or practice interview, and then we both call into a toll-free number where Gary Gonzalez will be at the other end, and he will record our interview, and that will be made available to the ONET community. And also user-focused webinars. So what we want are people to actually volunteer to develop a short presentation, say 10 minutes or so, on how they use ONET for a particular thing, be it with the older worker, military member in transition, persons with disabilities, how they use labor market information, whatever the topic, and get like 3 of you on a similar topic together to actually do the PowerPoint and share your information with the ONET community. I would moderate those webinars. I would organize the questions and all, but you would actually be doing what I've just been doing for about 10-15 minutes, sharing your knowledge and how you have incorporated ONET information in terms of what you're doing. So I've listed my email address, and if you're at all interested in any of these, please send me an email. I encourage you to do that. Once people start doing this, they find that they really enjoy sharing their information. It's not as intimidating as it may sound first off. Again, it's a way to share your information with other people and give other people an idea of how they can incorporate and utilize ONET in a more maximum way, helping more people, helping students. So please send me an email and say you're interested in this, and I'll follow up with you with a phone call. So again, my email address is sagesolutions@earthlink.net. And I'm going to keep that up there for a while, and I'm going to take a look at a question here that has come in. Is there any way to know how many people are looking for a particular occupation? There may be a lot of job growth, for example, but enormous numbers of people applying for such jobs in Florida, let's say. I personally do not know of that information. If anyone else on this webinar knows how, or if anyone is tracking that, by all means, unmute your phone and let us know. So I'm not sure how that kind of information is collected, or if it is collected at all. So sorting again by people seeking jobs in a particular occupation. And I also now want to, in closing, and I still encourage you to send in questions. We do several other webinars. All of these are recorded and posted on ONETacademy.com. So it's a recorded webinar and also the PowerPoint slides. And you can see the variety of topics that we've done webinars on. And we continue also to do these live as well. So periodically you'll see these done again in a live capacity where you have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. So we do whole person assessment. We focus on the assessment tools, the career exploration tools of ONET, ONET tools for the military member in transition, ONET tools for school counselors and counselor educators, for the older worker, for the job seeker. We have one on linking education, occupations, and pay, one on behind the scenes with ONET data collection, and as I mentioned, we also have one on emerging occupations and several other topics. So this is a sampling. So again, I urge you to please contact me at sagesolutions@earthlink.net, and we'll get you going with a spotlight or a podcast or a participation in a user-focused webinar. So I don't see any other questions coming in, so I want to thank you very much for your attention in this webinar, and I hope to see you in future webinars. And I'm going to be checking my email right away, and I hope I have at least a dozen emails saying, yes, I'm interested in one of these opportunities, one or more of these opportunities. So you can actually share what you're doing with other people and give them ideas on how they can improve their own situation. So thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great day.